Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. This week, I'm really happy and excited to have on the show Ben Dyer. I first heard about Ben actually when one of my good friends sent me an article in WhatsApp about Ben being part of the successful Cambridge rowing team in the big boat race this year between Cambridge and Oxford. And in 2017, Ben joined Cambridge, never actually rowed before, spent the next few years climbing the ranks until he made it into the first team, which is called the Blue Boat, I understand, from what I understand. This would be impressive anyway, but what I didn't tell you is that in 2017, Ben was also diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And so, anyone getting this diagnosis in any stage of their life, would find this difficult. But Ben was just embarking on, a newly formed rowing career and trying to deal with the demands of that, whilst also trying to deal with, the mental challenges that can come with having a chronic health issue like that was really difficult. Added to that, like me, he's a man, so clearly he didn't really want to talk about it and probably didn't want to talk to too many people. So even just opening up, was difficult. Fast forward to today, Ben has got beyond a lot of those problems and has been able to put his condition into remission and is in a situation now where he's, fully engrossed in a PhD and is in the, loving the aftermath of achieving kind of like the pinnacle in his sport in the country. So for me, Ben's like just such a great example and inspiration to, first of all, to myself, because sport is something I miss a lot, and getting back to where I can perform at a high level is just really inspiring, and I just know it will be inspiring to anyone else listening into this. So apologies for the long intro. How's it going, mate? How are you?
Yeah, no, I'm really good, thanks. Thanks for having me on the podcast, first and foremost. And I've just been kind of enjoying a bit more time to get on with my PhD rather than rowing for a considerable amount of time, to be honest.
Cool. Well, let's take it back to before 2017. Could you talk us through like what your health was like then? Did you ever have you must have always been quite a sporty person. I don't think you can suddenly just become the rower that you've become. Did you ever have any health issues before? Could you talk us through how things were before then?
Yeah, so I guess growing up, no health issues at all. I'd say is very healthy. Everybody in my family is very healthy, kind of lucky in that regard. And so I'd been into distance running. I'd moved out from my job to Dubai and kind of got involved in the local running scene, a lot of 5Ks, 10Ks. I delved into half marathons, not quite the full marathon at that stage. And I was fairly competitive, nothing great. I'm a bit too tall and heavy to be a good runner, but kind of getting into the scene, racing a lot, and my time started to slow. And as a competitive person, I was like searching for answers, training harder, and then times got slower. And kind of my club mates were getting further and further ahead, and I was getting more frustrated. And after one particularly bad race, I spoke to a member of my club. She was an older lady, and she said, "Have you had your bloods checked?" I was like, "No, why would I do that?" And essentially, the long story short, I had anemia. It was quite severe, actually. And so the instant response, being on health insurance out in Dubai, get an iron infusion. Anemia is low iron, so replace your iron, and that's what I did. And my performance was back where it was, if not better. I was, able to get personal bests again, and I was happy. But lo and behold, a few months later, same thing happens, and kind of goes in a bit of a cycle from there. And then returning to the UK, asking for a iron transfusion, the doctor kind of looks at me and he's like, "Well, it's not really a routine thing that we give to people so they can run faster." And that's, yeah, from there, had the typical tests that you would get to diagnose Crohn's.
What were the symptoms? Because you mentioned you were running slower, but did you feel what were your like general symptoms on a day-to-day basis? Could you, although you were running slower, did you feel more fatigued? What were the actual symptoms itself that led to the Crohn's diagnosis?
Yeah, for sure. So they're actually pretty similar to if anybody is a high level athlete, just training fatigue and overtraining. It feels like you're overtrained and you need to back off. As I guess a relatively inexperienced athlete, I didn't really understand that you should back off when you feel overtrained. So I just thought, okay, keep training. But yeah, generally just feeling fatigued. Dizziness has always affected me. I am very tall, so when I stand up, tall people further to go. Again, so I kind of brushed that off. I had an explanation for everything.
Mm.
So fatigue and dizziness would be the main ones. But I just thought, well, I'm training more. I'm running more. I'm running harder. It's really hot out in the desert. I'm running in the day sometimes. And yeah, I had a reasonable explanation for everything, and that's why I never looked further.
Yeah. Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Crohn's? Isn't it? Or maybe I'm wrong. It's something in your stomach, right? You have stomach issues, or is that not right?
Yeah. So it's to do with, yeah, I guess the stomach, or for me, it's the small intestine.
Mm.
It's an overactive immune system, and it just flares up. Doesn't digest food in the normal way, and yeah, can give you a lot of pain down in your stomach area. Bloating, but mainly, well, yeah, diarrhea, things like that.
Mm.
But cramps and fatigue and dizziness and just being very tired. In extreme cases, just being bedbound. So yeah, it's an overactive immune system. It starts to just attack itself, and you don't recover well because you're not taking the nutrients out of the food.
And you were so when you came back to the UK, how old were you at that point?
2017, I was 25.
25. And so at this point, you decided to quit your job, and is this when you decided you wanted to do a PhD? Had you always decided you wanted to do that?
Yeah, so I'd always fancied a PhD. I guess I was fairly academic, through school, and particularly during undergrad, I kind of found that I was actually, more academic than I'd maybe first thought. And then going into the working world, it was good, but I was always just a little bit not sure. So I kind of sought more technically challenging work, and I just felt I'd always kind of leant towards the academic route. I particularly enjoyed my undergraduate degree a lot more than working in an office.
Mm.
And part of it was I was getting quite into the running, and I felt I'd like a little more free time, or a little more flexibility in my schedule rather than this rigid office hours. So it was a mixture of things. I'd say mainly it was an intellectual curiosity, something a bit more technically challenging.
Mm.
And yeah, part of it was the freedom that a PhD can give you, to, a bit more freedom on your schedule.
But how long before, or was it before you went to Cambridge that you got your diagnosis?
So I wasn't officially diagnosed until after I arrived at Cambridge.
Right.
So I'd been getting the anemia, and I guess I diagnosed myself. Well, I was diagnosed with anemia. That's factual. It was after arriving in Cambridge. I arrived in July, and I worked. Just essentially, I did my PhD. I started early in the department, and then I was just getting my prescription for, or asking for more blood transfusions shortly after. And that's kind of when the doctors started looking further into it. I believe I was diagnosed just as the PhD was starting, actually, October 2017.
Right. you talk us through what went through? Had you even heard of Crohn's disease at that point?
No, I didn't know what it was, and I just, it was a label to me. I didn't think too much of it. I was just like, okay, there's an explanation for something. Can I get the iron infusion now? Yeah, it was just performance for me. That's what I was interested in. I hadn't really related the fatigue and tiredness and dizziness to the Crohn's. I thought that was just part of being a runner, and that was okay to me. It just meant I needed to rest more to go faster. I was just so performance oriented. Yeah, it was a label.
And so that you didn't like go on Google and think, okay, or do some research into it and see, maybe potentially some kind of like negativity around, not being able to recover and stuff like that.
So I Googled it, but I just didn't look that deeply. I do remember searching it, and I just, I'm not one to really read around. I was just almost in like, no, I was in the mindset of definitely like, I'm a healthy young male. I'm, would like to regard myself as athletic. And I was just more in denial. I guess looking back, I'd say it wasn't that I was disinterested in what Crohn's was. I was like, but I was in denial about the fact that I could possibly have something that would actually be debilitating. I guess I just didn't want to believe it. And if you don't believe something, to a degree, you can suppress it. I guess that's what I did until symptoms got worse and it caught up with me.
It's interesting when you say denial. That almost has a kind of negative connotation, but actually, in some ways, as long as you're not being reckless, which I don't know, maybe we'll go on to that. Maybe you were being a bit reckless because of training and whatnot. It's actually the sensible thing to do because you're not paying attention to the noise. You're actually, you're actually saying, no, I feel like I am a healthy person. I am, I'm not this label that they give me. Whereas what I've done and what many people have had on the show have done have just gone into kind of Google mode, Facebook mode, where you just research everything about it, and before you know it, you've mapped out the next negative 20 years in front of you. So I think that's actually, that's quite cool that you did that. But then how did that turn from it being that kind of position to your symptoms suddenly starting to overwhelm you? What was that tipping point?
The tipping point was waking up unconscious, for sure. So my symptoms are worse after testing, particularly testing on the rowing machine. Anything which induces lactate, so high rate or free rate, which just means going up and down as fast as you can.
Sorry, when you say testing, just so people can know, can you just tell us what that means? Is that like a time trial kind of thing in rowing?
Sorry, testing. So like a 2K test, a race.
Okay. Cool.
A race against yourself and against the clock on the rowing machine.
Yeah.
So it'd be like doing a 5K on the treadmill, but it's a 2K or a 5K on the rowing machine.
Yeah.
And these machines, it's just the nature of rowing. It's very aerobic, like running, but it also induces a lot of lactate, and it's particularly lactate that makes symptoms a lot worse. Essentially, you're tested, you push yourself to your limit, and I found my limits, shall we say, and your body just shuts down. So I was going to sprint. I'd signed up to the University Development Squad, so this is we're 6 months into my PhD now. I'd been training and just assuming that this extra fatigue was just the additional training. Rowing, typically you train twice a day, like 11 to 12 sessions a week is very normal. So I just thought the extra fatigue was that. And so I'm back to I've got a reasonable explanation for this fatigue. Crohn's isn't in the forefront of my mind still. Back to this test. I'm kind of going along and I'm feeling, okay, relatively speaking. And I go to sprint for the line and my new coach is like screaming at me. And I remember he told me like, right now it was 250 meters to go, which is less than a minute. It's about 45 seconds into a 6-minute test. So yeah, you're through the mentally hard part. You just said close your eyes and just sprint as fast as you can, and I did that. And my body just felt like it started shutting down, and I just started going slower and slower. It's like in the last 10 strokes, it just couldn't, just like slower and slower, just like the power, my legs just stopped going down. And then after that, I just felt very ill. You collapse on the floor, and some people do that for theatrics. I'd seen it, BBC documentary Gold Fever. They follow the Olympic four as they're training for the final Olympics, and you see them collapsing off the ergo. Interestingly, one of them is Steve Redgrave, who has colitis, so he actually has a very similar condition. But I think since then, the average rower viewing that doesn't know he has colitis, and they're like, oh right, so it's kind of known as theatrics. You don't want to be rolling around the floor. So I just kind of tried to pick myself up. But you get this throbbing headache, you get a migraine, and then the vomiting comes. And yeah, if you try and move, you just start vomiting again. And even if it's nothing, it just keeps, your body just keeps trying. It's as if like this lactate, it's as if you've got an allergic reaction to the lactate you've put in your legs. And the body is not happy, and then after about 20 minutes you start to just shiver and get really cold and shaking, and it could be a warm day, but the body's just confused as to what's going on. So this is kind of the test experience, and I remember questioning like, what have I got myself into? And yeah, one test, I think about my third test, it was a 5 kilometer, so a bit longer to get more lactate in. Some very similar symptoms, but this time I fell unconscious. And I just woke up, I'd be pretty close to unconscious when I would be vomiting. And I just woke up and checked the time, and my coach had messaged me 2 hours ago saying, couldn't find you. Sorry, I had to go, because he had kids to pick up. And 3 hours had passed since the test, and it had felt like 20 minutes. I just remember I do remember waking up and going back to sleep and waking up. I just wake up and go, I don't feel quite right yet. I'm just going to close my eyes. And that was it. And then I was ill for days after that. Like, I didn't feel good for days after that. And that was kind of the first major wake-up call.
Wow, that sounds crazy. Were you just on the floor then of the gym or wherever you were, just passed out?
So I've kind of learned, I have about a 5-minute window before the vomiting starts, so I find a toilet as quickly as possible, or the river. First couple of times I tested the river, but I know what's going to happen in a certain type of test. You've got about 5 minutes before the leg seize up, because obviously you were physically still able to move on the rowing machine.
Yeah,
a couple minutes before. It takes I think the lactate is delayed a little bit, so that final sprint you have about a couple of minutes. I find 5 minutes before you're sick, but you have a couple of minutes where you're still able to move. It's more like crawl, but you are able to get there.
Yeah.
And I guess I chose the top. I mean, obviously, if you're vomiting, but almost just to get away as well, so other people didn't see you being weak, as it were. In rowing, it's viewed as weak to be, all crawling around the floor after a test. If you didn't have a condition, I'm sure you are making a big deal. You've just done a race. It's not the end of the world. It was self-induced, but yeah. So I was kind of in this argument between, why do I get so much worse? Am I being weak here, or do I really have something?
Yeah.
I guess the trigger realizing the latter was actually flying to China. I read Stephen Redgrave's book. So Steve Redgrave's book. So he's Britain's most successful Olympian, or at least has had that title. I don't know if anyone surpassed that since, but he is still to this day the only person to get 5 consecutive gold medals at the Olympics. He was diagnosed with colitis in his final Olympic cycle, and who was regarded at the time as the world's best rower suddenly was being, and he's in a position where he might not have made the boat. And he talks about his struggle with colitis and gold fever. And so after reading his book, I rewatched that, and with a new perspective, I was like, that's why he went so slowly on that ergo test. And that's why he collapses off the ergo. And literally, he just collapses and he looks unconscious. At least he's collapsed. And then I started to piece it together, and I went, well, that's what I have. Colitis and Crohn's and colitis. They're 2 very similar conditions. Yeah. And from there, that was the beginning of me accepting it, realizing an explanation for why I was always so much more ill after tests than other people, and then ultimately opening up to coaches, family, friends about it, and teammates, so people understood, if Ben gets ill after the ergo, he's not just being weak, it's actually him fighting through a condition.
Were you so at what point did you go to China and you had that realization? When was that?
That was at the end of my first year rowing. So I've described, we've started rowing in October 2017. I've described the first time I did a proper test with a coach screaming at me 6 months in. That was April 2018. And then that summer in August 2018, there was an invite it was a Cambridge crew, but they selected a college crew to go in their place. We did a trip out to China. And it was that book that really, reading that, I was like, pieced a lot together for me.
Before that point, before you had this realization, I definitely want to talk about that because I think it's really important. Were you having advice from doctors to slow down and to say, you're not able to do this, you shouldn't be doing this, or were you even going to see doctors at that point?
So I was seeing it was a gastro specialist at Addenbrooke's. So in Cambridge, we have a large, hospital, Addenbrooke's. I'd saw them, and I was always very clear that I was training hard. I wouldn't say I was ever dissuaded from rowing or training hard. I'd say it was a balance. They'd say, well, obviously, you're going to have extra fatigue when you're training, and it's hard to differentiate. But I'd say somewhere in the middle. They certainly didn't say you can't row, which was good. But I think maybe they just picked up that wasn't an option with me. Like, rowing was the priority. Like, I'm a very competitive person, and before it was running, and now it was rowing, and that's what I was going to do. I guess I laid down, here's who I am. I identify as a rower, and I'm here to talk about my condition and how we can manage it so I can keep doing that. I guess I didn't really accept it was anything as serious as it was until I had the realization, being unconscious, for example, and reading that book. I didn't really know.
How did it feel before you read that book and before that point? Like, how did it feel? You talked, and we've talked offline about kind of being a man in this situation where and a lot of the guests I have on the show are women, and they just seem to find it a lot easier to just immediately share it with people and share where they're at. And when we were talking about it, I remembered that it was a few years before I even mentioned it to a couple of years before I mentioned it to my girlfriend, a few years before I mentioned it to my friends, and then people at work. I only did that when I was forced to, and a lot of that comes with pride, right? You don't want to be seen as you don't want to be seen as there's anything wrong with you, there's anything weak with you, or also for me, didn't want to like burden other people with it. I was kind of nervous they wouldn't get it. What was going through your mind in that time leading up to that? Like, why were you not as keen to talk about it? And was that difficult for you not being able to talk about it?
Yeah, I'd relate a lot to that. I'd say I have, a typical male ego or a lot of pride. I guess I was in this new environment where I wanted to be this successful rower, and successful rowers are very macho, and they have to be very strong and can't show pain. So that would have influenced how, open I was about it. I didn't tell my parents for, until after I'd kind of worked out, okay, this is serious. I'd definitely describe a lot of denial, and a bit of pride. I still haven't told a lot of people at work. Like, sure, they've now read about it in the news, and that's fine. I think it's important to open up. It's just, I guess, partly being private and partly being, pride male. You want to be tough, and just I guess I hadn't really truly accepted something was wrong, so there was nothing to tell. Was another factor in that. It didn't really hit home that I had this issue that could actually get a lot worse. And I guess I've since experienced that, and since experienced spiraling and gone, okay, we can't, that will get in the way of rowing. That will actually just get in the way of general life, never mind just performance.
And so beyond the point where you kind of, that turning point for you, what changed then to make it so you could actually get into the position where your symptoms and the condition was in remission?
So from the point of, I guess, reading the book and following unconscious, it was kind of first speaking to people. Okay, something's up, and they obviously encourage you to go to the doctor, and you go to the doctor, and you're a lot more ready to accept help at this point, rather than just kind of going to the doctor and them interviewing you and you wanting to go. It was more like I want some new medication to help me this time. You're open to help when you do see the doctor. And obviously through the medical system, they redid some tests, put me on stronger medication, and it was azathioprine that I'm now on. Well, actually, it was non-anabolic steroids. So the type of steroids that aren't the ones that get a lot of bad rep. Of course, of them, they act very fast and very effectively, and I basically experienced life without Crohn's for the first time in a couple of years, and my performance has got a lot faster. But steroids, it's a 3-month course. You can't be on them for very long. Came off them again and was back to where I was. So obviously, now I'd accepted the condition, and now, you'd told your parents are obviously following up, like, have you got this sorted yet? Have you been to the doctor? I guess that's like the kind of, you have others that care. Kind of making sure you do get things sorted, rather than just, if you choose to be in denial about it, then, you can push it to the back of your mind. So it's in the forefront of my mind, and with the doctor's help and the medication. So azathioprine is an immunosuppressant. I guess it works in a similar way to the steroids. It's just a longer term, safer solution. And sure, it took a while to kick in. It wasn't the instant relief that the steroids gave. But now I've been on it for it's a year. It works, well enough. It means that it's within my control. I can, if things are getting bad, I can detect that and take measures, take extra rest, be easier on my diet, be easier on training before it flares out of control.
And so how would you say, like, mentally, like these days, having kind of been through that process, how would you say you are, like, mentally about, having the condition, and knowing that you need to be on medication? Like, how does that affect you in any way? Or it sounds like you're pretty strong-willed and strong-minded about it.
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of it's more like, again, it's the friends and family that are like, we need to get you off this medication. We need to check, if there's anything else. Or for me, I'm just a bit, yeah, I mean, if these tablets that I take allow me to row and push my body to the extreme, that's excellent. I guess it isn't great that you need this medication, but it's there to help you.
Mm,
So I'm going to take that help.
of course.
I
Yeah.
like the medication.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a straight. We had someone on the show fairly recently with Crohn's, and she ultimately was able to go into remission through taking medication. And we discussed how it's interesting that with Crohn's, you are able to have. There are some success stories with medication. A lot of the other chronic health issues, like me, for example, taking antibiotics that they kind of try and get you to do if they suspect you to have Lyme disease, it goes the other way and impacts you worse. But if someone told me I could take a drug that would make me feel better and let me, perform the way I used to, I would 100% do it. There's, of course. Do you have to like change your diet or your lifestyle in any way? Is that something you have to be aware of?
Yeah, so that is part of the parcel. So, okay, well, to deal with Crohn's, you need to eat little and often. You need to cut out, say, whole grains, anything hard to digest.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a bit of change to what I eat. There is change to when and how much I can eat. You don't want to overload the stomach at any point. I require extra sleep. That can be a challenge in a shared house at times. Particularly students, they like to stay up quite late. While we're rowing, you're waking up at 6, and if you need 10 hours sleep, you're going to bed pretty early. Now, obviously, 10 hours sleep's a luxury that's probably reserved for when we get up a little later. But no, I'm in bed at 9 most nights, particularly during the boat race season. Yeah, even before 9 sometimes. So sleep and nutrition would be the main things, and then changes to just to mention the medication. Like medication comes with side effects. Being on immunosuppressants means you are immunosuppressed. With a pandemic, that's not great. So lifestyle changes, kind of not because of Crohn's, but because of Crohn's medication. Needing to shield for one during a pandemic, and then training through shield, training alone. I guess dealing with the immunosuppressants, also dealing with colds and flu. Well, they take me out for a lot longer. You pick up a cold, a normal person, a couple of weeks. Well, an athlete takes a little longer because their immune system is getting a bit of a going over by the exercise. Well, add in immunosuppressants and you have a pretty nasty cycle. So, and then it just means when I get a cold, it's back to the extra sleep. It's being really careful with the diet, don't upset the Crohn's. So I guess I've just got a bit of a lower threshold for what my body can handle. And I kind of assess, what's going on. And particularly during summer, there's less colds going around. I often perform better in winter. I've struggled every winter. There's no perfect solution. I haven't found a perfect solution yet. This winter was horrible at times, but you get through it and it makes you tougher. Particularly in sporting mindset. And then I enjoyed the summers, and thankfully the race was in April, so I was feeling better by then. So there are definitely challenges. It's not perfect, but you can make it work.
So could you talk us through kind of like the mental like challenges you had, like I guess at the time where you were, you knew something was wrong, but you hadn't really told anyone, like, and were there times where you were just like, am I going to be like this forever? Am I ever going to be able to find a solution? And if so, like, how did you kind of keep going in those times?
I'd say I'm very optimistic in general. So it comes back to partially it's the denial, but partially it's just this unwavering optimism that I'm going to be fine. I just have a true belief that I will be fine.
Mm,
So I guess that's part of why I didn't accept the condition.
yeah.
So yeah, in all honesty, I just don't allow myself. I kind of, it's almost like training your mind to not think those. Just don't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That's who I am and how I deal with it, and I just kind of look for ways to fix it rather than kind of worry about if it's going to go on forever. And my medication, the doctor said 5 years because I just felt okay, like that's what they've told me, and that's what I'll do then. What they've told me so far has helped me.
Yeah.
And I just have a trust in the doctors and the specialists to put me on what's right. It's working so far.
I love the way in which you think about these things. It's weird because I'd like to think that I am an optimistic and positive person. However, when it came to this, because it's so foreign to me, it really, I did go down some rabbit holes and continue to, and probably at times felt too sorry for myself. These days, not so much. I am training my mind, and I just think it's amazing that you were doing that naturally anyway. And I think to anyone listening, listening to you saying that unwavering optimism, that's just a nice way to live life anyway. Like, regardless of what you've got going on. Otherwise, every single little thing that hits you in your day, you're like, another thing. I always remember there was a guy I used to work with, and he always used to just go, every single time something bad happened to him, it was always, my luck. And you get these people in life who just feel like they've been beaten up, and it's just they're attracting more of that stuff. And I guess by being eternally optimistic like you are actually attracting more, positive stuff to come into your life.
Yeah, I call these people problem makers. Myself as a problem solver. But yeah, we all experience these people in life, and everything that hits them is an issue, and it's unfair. Well, just train your mind to, or try and, do it in steps. Try and train your mind to just think a bit more positively and appreciate what's good, I mean, I appreciate my physiology or my unique position. Like, not many people get to train in the Cambridge University Boat Club. It's a privileged position just to be in the university, never mind a selective rowing team within that. I'm just grateful for, I guess, my height and my physiology that allows me to still be there despite a chronic condition. So I guess it's a balance. I'd still take my position over many other people. Just one extra challenge I have to deal with, but you can turn it into a positive as well, just by having dealt with the kind of the pain and debilitation after a rowing machine test. It's made me a lot tougher. When Oxford are closing back on you and it hurts, well, aerobic pain is nothing compared to pain after an erg test. Enough pain to make you fall unconscious. I can tell you it hurts a lot more than any pain you can ever put yourself voluntarily during a race. You just train your brain to, I guess it puts you in a new level of discomfort, such that during a rowing race, when I'm feeling discomfort, I'm like, this is fine, I'm doing this voluntarily. So try and find positives within negatives. And unwavering optimism, as I say, helps me anyway.
What I think you've just answered the question there. And I was going to say, what advice would you give to someone right now who's kind of in the depths of and maybe they don't have unwavering optimism? It sounded like you were saying then look for the good things that's going on in your life. Focus on gratitude, which I think is 2 bits of amazing advice. Is there anything else, like maybe more from a mindset point of view?
Yeah, so mindset, I guess you can relate it to sport a lot in the way, just a positive mindset. Like a coach said to me, a world-renowned coach from the club, a guest coach, he just says during a rowing machine test, or positive talk, once you start thinking, oh, this hurts. Oh, yeah, it does hurt. And once you think about it, it hurts more because the brain's now concentrating on it. You got to think about like, oh, not I'm halfway in, I've got halfway more to go. You got to think, oh, I'm already halfway done. And if you kind of glass half full rather than glass half empty, it can really, things that like from testing on the rowing machine actually taught me that positive thoughts genuinely make you go faster, because they kind of spiral up. You kind of feel, oh, I feel strong, and then you relax, and because you're relaxed, you're then more efficient and you are faster. Whereas when you have negative thoughts in a rowing race, you kind of tense up and you get worried and you start to yank on it, and you actually do things that are inefficient and slow the boat down. So it's this kind of, rowing has taught me that positive thoughts actually make things better. So if you can kind of tune in to, any positive thoughts, or anytime you are, say, having a good performance in sport or even just a good day, tune into like, what did you do maybe differently? Just have a bit of mindfulness into like, why am I having, what I'm feeling good today? What have I done? What was I thinking? And try and replicate that. And when you have a bad performance or a bad day, try and think about, okay, what did I let creep in? And try and identify factors that lead to positive mindset or negative mindset.
I think that's great advice, and I think that's a really nice point to kind of draw the podcast to a close. I think, everything you've said today is like, resonates a lot with me, particularly, just that unwavering optimism. I just love that as a phrase. I think it's you've got and I know it's going to be more difficult on some days than others, but you do have a choice how you feel, and you can have an impact on how you feel, and that's something that I've realised a lot more in the last few years, and you're definitely highlighting that for me. So thank you so much for coming on. If anyone did want to reach out to you, just to maybe, there might be people listening to this who've got some questions around your treatment or anything, is maybe could they reach out to you via Instagram or?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So you were able to find me on Instagram really easily. Ben_Dyer_92. I'm happy to. I did get quite a lot of messages actually from people with Crohn's. I guess they read articles around the time of the boat race. I'm happy to speak to anybody. Particularly performance or sports mindset and how that relates to, well, in particular Crohn's, but any chronic disease.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'll include that in the show notes. And thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot from listening to that story.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you very much for having me.